Hey everyone, how's it going? God Gamer here, and today I'm going to be doing a Hollow Knight Charm tier list. It's 2021, so a few years after the game released, but thanks to that we're going to have a bit more knowledge and experience going into this. I'm going to be ranking these within the tiers, but I'm also going to be ranking them from left to right within the tiers. Now, some charms are pretty situational, so it's not like charms are always going to be good in every circumstance. You can't expect it to be a perfect tier list, but it will be, I think, pretty accurate given that I have a lot of experience speedrunning, got a lot of experience doing challenge runs, and kind of like casual playthroughs of modded stuff as well. But yeah, as you can see, we started off the tier list. Grimmchild's already at the bottom, and that's probably going to be one of the worst charms in the game. So Grimmchild, I'm sorry, but you are a D tier charm. Okay, so we're pretty much just going to be starting off at the top left and going all the way down to the bottom right. So the first charm we'll look at is Wielder. And Wielder I would put in A tier. Not exactly sure where within the A tier, but it's definitely a really good charm. Now, Wielder only costs one charm notch, and it actually has two effects for your Nail. And for those who aren't totally aware, if you hit an enemy with it, it gives you one cast of soul, so 33 soul. But if you have Wielder, then it gives you 66 soul, and it increases the animation speed of your Nail significantly. In the early to mid-game stages of Hollow Knight, where you're pretty much always going to be using Shaman Stone if you are experienced as a player, Wielder is really good because it'll give you two casts of soul. That's two Descending Darks. And that's gonna just put a huge dent in most bosses. So Wielder is really an excellent charm. You can also use it to farm enemies for soul, just to heal up, like in Colosseums and such. Really, really good charm. And it even enables you to get soul really quickly in some places where you normally can't get soul, such as like the Collector. Really, really good charm overall. It just kind of falls off a little bit in the late game because you have these other means of getting soul, like you're probably using Quick Slash within a late game build, so the soul generation that you get from Nail isn't quite as useful because you can just slap enemies with your nail super quickly to get all the soul that you need. But definitely early to mid game, I recommend trying Wielder out. Using Nail is a commitment, right? You have to get stuck in that animation. But Wielder makes it a lot safer, and it gives you twice the soul, so it's a great charm. Okay, and next up is going to be Unbreakable Heart. So this is a charm that, in my opinion, is a bit underrated, and if I were ranking it, I would put it within the A tier. I think I'd put it above Wielder just because in the late game, and the late game's probably the most relevant because that's where you're going to be spending the most of your time in God Home and such. Unbreakable Heart's a great charm, okay? For 2 notch cost, you get 2 masks. Unlike with Lifeblood, you have all these Lifeblood options, but they're not as good. And the reason why is you can't heal Lifeblood. You can heal masks. So masks are better, straight up. A lot of builds have 2 notches open. Like if you're using, Shaman Stone, Unbreakable Strength, Quick Slash, you have 2 notches. So if you want that extra bit of survivability so you can just like face tank a boss, Unbreakable Heart is the way to go. A really good charm, and I'd recommend trying it out if you are kind of afraid of using it. If you think it's a newbie option or something, it's not, okay? It's actually really good, so give Unbreakable Heart a try. Next up is Unbreakable Strength, and this is just the easiest S tier of my life. This is arguably the best charm in the game. So what it does is it increases your nail damage by 50%. Okay, and like no matter what, you're going to be using nail damage in Hollow Knight. There are instances in early game where you have your 5 damage nail and it's not a big increase. So yeah, it's not that great in early game, but as soon as you get a couple nail upgrades, Fragile Strength is such an amazing charm. Even if you don't have the Unbreakable version, like personally, I realized how strong this charm was in my initial playthrough, and That was back before the Grim Troop was even a thing, so you couldn't get Unbreakable Strength. I still used the charm in my casual playthrough, and whenever I died, I would go back to Leg Eater and, repair the charm, and it was still worth it. I didn't die that much because the charm made you so strong that you just don't die with it. So, like, even the fragile version is crazy. I did not Absrad. I did regular Radiance. Absrad wasn't a thing back then. I did regular Radiance first try because I just used Quick Slash and just hit it until it died, and it was pretty easy. I think I came close to dying, but I mean, the point is, the charm is crazy good if you have a maxed nail. If you have nail 2 or nail 3, still really good. You're going to be using your nail damage no matter what. Even if you have a spell build, you're still using the nail damage. So definitely use the charm. I would say Unbreakable Strength is core to almost any charm build. So you should use this charm almost no matter what. Definitely one of the best charms in the game. Next up is Glowing Womb. Now this charm, in my opinion, is a piece of crap. But the question is, how much of a piece of crap is it? Is it C tier crap or D tier crap? And I'm not sure. The charm does have some use. Like, the benefit of Glowing Womb is that you don't really have to do anything for it to get the effect. Like, it's kind of like you're using spells without actually having to cast them. The problem is that the spells really suck, and it takes away your soul without having the option of using it to heal instead. So if you're going from point A to point B, if you're like traveling around the map and you want to be able to heal, having Glowing Womb equipped really sucks, because you'll try to heal and it's just going to be like, nope, I'm spawning one of these dumbass bees instead, and it's not good. So it does have some uses. If you're going into a boss fight, maybe you'd want to use Glowing Womb against some bosses, in which case it might be C tier. It's definitely D tier going around the map, because you want to be able to heal up, dude. It's healing is good in this video game. Not exactly sure. I might put it in D tier, but it does have some use. You might use it against some Hall of Gods bosses as like a gimmick build. Probably not the best gimmick build to use, but it has some use, I suppose. It also has a synergy with Defender's Crest, where it spawns like poison clouds. I've never seen it in my life. I just saw it on the wiki. Probably useless. Don't worry about it. Okay. Heavy Blow. Everyone puts this at the bottom of D tier. I'm going to say something controversial. This charm does not belong in D tier. It belongs at the bottom of C tier, because it does have some use, okay? Now, Heavy Blow, it makes enemies get knocked back further. It also has a hidden effect, okay? Secret effect. And that secret effect is that enemies and, well, bosses who get staggered, such as Lost Kin, Hornet, THK, they take one less hit to get staggered. And that sounds like nothing. But some bosses only require like 6 hits to get staggered. So if you go down to 5, all of a sudden, like, it's 1, 2 plus a Descending Dark, and they're staggered again, instead of being 3 hits, at which point, they'll probably be jumping across the arena and you can't follow them anymore. So pretty much this is just good against Lost Kin. But I mean, it does have some use. It's pretty good against Lost Kin, actually. So if you're having trouble with Rad Hog and you're doing Lost Kin, go for Heavy Blow. It's actually a pretty good charm against that boss. It also has some use against like Oblobbles, if you're doing Radiant Oblobbles, because they have those phases where you go in and attack and then they start shooting and you run away. But if you knock them back while you're attacking them to the other side of the arena, then you don't have to worry quite so much about running away. So it does have some use. Like, it's not a D tier charm. I would say it's close to the bottom of C tier. Next up is Hiveblood. Okay, And Hiveblood is a little bit hard to rank because it has the huge drawback of costing 4 charm notches, and it also takes a long time to use, so it's pretty situational. Also not so great against bosses that deal 2 damage as opposed to 1. So this is another really situational charm. Also, of course, it's great for platforming challenges because, you know, it's mainly just for convenience, but it does help out in those cases. I would put Hiveblood in the B tier because it does have some use. Like if you're up against some Dream Warriors where, you know, they don't stagger, so there's not many good opportunities to heal, but you can still dodge them pretty well if you play patiently. Hiveblood is pretty good in those cases, like against Markoth, for example. Also against Traitor Lords or Sisters of Battle. Hiveblood can be pretty useful there. Overall, I wouldn't use it for something like Pantheon runs because it's too situational. Most bosses, I don't think you'll get good use out of it. And it doesn't have too many interesting synergies either. So overall, just like 12 seconds is a bit long, but it does have some value. That's why I'll put it in B tier. Against the bosses that it's good against, it's a pretty decent charm to use, but I think generally there are better options. So I think this will be the lower end of B tier personally. Okay, next up we've got Kingsoul. Now Kingsoul costs 5 notches. It isn't available for most of the game, and then by the time you get it, you just replace it with Void Heart. Okay, the effect is you get 4 soul every 2 seconds. So like 1 soul, or 2 soul a second. Sorry, math is hard. It's not a great effect, okay? So passively getting soul from doing nothing, it's kind of nice, I guess. Grubsong costs 1 notch and gives you 15 soul when you get hit, which is generally a lot in this game. This gives you 4 soul every 2 seconds. And it costs 5 times the notch cost of Grubsong. So I wonder which charm is better. Generally, this charm doesn't matter that much because you're not going to use it because you're going to replace it. The main purpose of Kingsoul is for challenges where you can't use your nail. So if you're doing a challenge run where you do Radiance without hitting with your nail, Kingsoul's pretty good, I guess. Otherwise, I would say it's probably bottom of C tier because it does have some use. It gives you soul. Soul is great in this video game. So it's not like Grimmchild, but it's not that great either. Maybe we'll put it above Heavy Blow. Okay, next up is Lifeblood Heart. This charm, okay, so if you're early on in the game and you don't have any other options, because you do get this from Salubra, so you can get Lifeblood Heart very early on. The problem is that it gives you the exact same effect as Unbreakable or Fragile Heart, except they're Lifeblood instead of real masks, and it's the same notch cost, so it's like just worse. So once you get Unbreakable Heart and you're not afraid of it breaking, then this is just, Unbreakable Heart is just objectively better. The only thing is that you need Lifeblood Hearts to get Lifeblood Core, which is also, in my opinion, not a great charm. So overall, I'd put this charm in C tier because Lifeblood just doesn't offer the same benefits as masks. Like, you can't heal it. If you want to heal it, you'll have to use Hiveblood or something, and at Hiveblood, like, we're committing 6 charm notches to a shit build. Like, it's not that beneficial. So I would recommend against using Lifeblood Heart, but it's not terrible. I would say it's better than Glowing Womb, so I'm putting it at the top of C tier. Next up is Mark of Pride, baby. This is a sick charm, definitely S tier. Now the question is, where in S tier does it go? You might also argue it goes in A tier, but, you know, from a speedrunner's perspective, it's a little bit different. You might not necessarily want to use Mark of Pride in a speedrun, but in any other way that you're playing Hollow Knight, if you're doing hitless runs, challenge runs, casual play, Mark of Pride's like at the top or close to the top. Not only does it allow you to just be safer when you're playing the game because you can hit enemies from farther away. Being able to hit enemies from farther away can also enable you to hit enemies at times where you normally couldn't. So it allows you to punish certain boss attacks just because you have that extra range when you normally wouldn't be able to. So like if you're up against Pure Vessel uses his like 4 spikes things and you get stuck farther away from him, sometimes you won't have the range to hit him during that attack, whereas with Mark of Pride, you might be able to. And you know, during that attack, you can hit him like 6 times. So it just opens up opportunities. It lets you get more hits in, lets you get those hits in safer. More hits means more soul, which means more heals or spells, both of which in Hollow Knight are super important. So it's like more soul generation, more damage, more survivability. It's just an amazing charm overall. So does it go above Unbreakable Strength? I would say no, because part of the reason why Nail is so strong is because of Unbreakable Strength in the first place. So your Nail isn't quite as good without Unbreakable Strength, so I would say Mark of Pride is partially enabled to be as strong as it is because Unbreakable Strength exists. That's why I would say Mark of Pride is below Unbreakable Strength, but it's still really good. It also stacks additively with Longnail, so you can get 40% range increase. That's like sometimes beneficial, but Mark of Pride on its own gives you the majority of the range increase. So even though it costs 3 notches, most of the time I would recommend just using Mark of Pride. Longnail doesn't give quite as much of an effect. Really good charm, definitely recommend Mark of Pride. And it's Pride Month, so don't forget that. Next up, we have Nailmaster's Glory. So this is a really good charm. I would put it around Unbreakable Heart, definitely above it, probably at the top of A tier. I could see the argument for it being at the bottom of S tier, but for 1 charm notch cost, decreasing the charge time of Nail Arts to 0.75 seconds from 1.35 seconds is really, really strong. Now, Nail Arts aren't good against every boss in the game, but against some bosses, Nail Arts are super good, and it might be a little bit tough to use Nail Arts, but once you get used to it, it's just really strong against some bosses, against some attacks, and Nail Arts are especially potent against non-boss enemies. So in the Colosseums, Nail Arts are just like super good. Nailmaster's Glory in the Colosseums is really busted. You just get a Nail Art ready for every single enemy, and you just Nail Art them, and half the time, it'll just one-shot the enemy. So it's a really good charm. I would use this in between bosses a lot, and it's also great for just like Pantheon runs, for Radhog against specific bosses, and it costs 1 charm notch. Really good charm, definitely recommend it. Next up, we have this charm. It's already in the S tier. And that's because Shaman Stone is arguably the best charm in the game. I would say that for 90% or so of the game, Shaman Stone is the best charm in the game. And then once you get to the very end game, Shaman Stone is arguably outclassed by Unbreakable Strength or Quick Slash, but for most of the game, Shaman Stone just enables you to go into a boss fight with full soul and just cast your spells, and the boss dies. Like, once you get those level 1 spells at the beginning, you equip Shaman Stone and it just melts bosses. Then you get to later bosses and you have level 2 spells, and those are dealing 33% more damage, and you're just melting those bosses with Descending Darks. Like, if you get to like Broken Vessel with Descending Dark, it's like, how many times do you even have to cast? Like 5 times to kill the boss? Shaman Stone is just crazy, and you can do that throughout the game, and it only, like, okay, so Shaman Stone is a commitment. It costs 3 charm notches, but you don't need other charms with Shaman Stone to make the spell build. You just need Shaman Stone. You can use Spell Twister, you can use Soul Eater, you can use Soul Catcher, that's the charm. You can use Stream Wielder even if you want, but you don't need any of that. all you need is Shaman Stone and you've got a spell build. Nail builds require several charms to be really strong. Spell builds just need Shaman Stone. That's it. Best charm in the game, in my opinion. And I know a lot of people in their casual playthroughs don't use spells quite as much, but once you know how to use spells effectively, spells are just the way to go. So definitely I would recommend trying it out. Next up, we've got Shape of Un, baby. Now, Shape of Un is not the best charm in Hollow Knight, but it is the coolest by far. So when you heal, you turn into Sluggy and you get to move around. And if you have quick focus on as well, it has the synergy of letting you zoom across the map at faster than walking speed. And it's just really cool. It also has synergies, and it just changes the animation, and it's really cute. Now, Shape of Un, it costs 2 notches, and you're probably gonna maybe use it with other heal build items, charms rather. So you do have to commit to the build to some extent, but you can also just use it on its own if you're up against a boss where you can get extra heals off safely by using the movement. And as an example, I do personally use Shape of Un against Grim fights, like in Inferno King Grim, for example, but it's also good against Nightmare King Grim. And the reason why is, like, whenever it does the spike attack, for example, you can start a heal and then maneuver yourself into a safe spot and finish the heal. That's kind of the main benefit of Shape of Un. You can also use it to try and like heal up randomly and run away from attacks, but don't use it like that because it's generally not going to work. Try to find attacks that you can safely heal up with and use Shape of Un there. So where does Shape of Un go? I would put it at the bottom of A tier. It's actually pretty good. Definitely better than Hiveblood and all these charms, but I would say it's a step down from Dream Wielder. It is less of a commitment than Quick Focus, and that's a nice thing. If you want to boost your heals, but you don't have 3 charm notches, Shape of Un is a pretty good option. Okay, next up is Soul Eater. And Soul Eater is just in a weird spot because it costs 4 charm notches to use, and that's a lot compared to everything else in the game. But the effect is so much stronger than almost any other charm. It's got such a crazy effect. So instead of getting 11 soul per hit, you get plus 8 on top of that. So that's almost doubling the amount of soul you get per hit. So you go from 11 to 19. And consider, like, for example, if you have Spell Twister on as well, Spell Twister makes it so spells cost 24 soul instead of 33. So if you're getting 19 per hit, you're almost getting enough soul for a spell with every hit if you're using Spell Twister as well. So it's just such a strong effect, especially against bosses where soul is like a little bit more hard to come by. Soul Eater is just really strong, but it's just the fact that it costs 4 charm notches makes it really restrictive. So you can't use it most of the time, but if you're over charming, you're just gonna throw on the best charm you can, and that charm is often Soul Eater. So yeah, you can't use it all the time, but in spots where you can, I would say it's in the A tier, close to, if not at the top. Really strong charm, but you can't use it most of the time because the notch cost is just too restrictive. Really strong though, definitely recommend giving it a shot. And another charm in the spell build, Spell Twister. This charm is super, super good. And I'm kind of torn on whether it should go in the S tier at the bottom or at the top of the A tier. Because I would say it's definitely better than Nailmaster's Glory. But I think it's probably overall a little bit worse than Mark of Pride, at least in the end game. Arguably in the early game, Spell Twister is better than Mark of Pride, but I would say this goes in the top of A tier. So, as I said in the last charm, it reduces your soul cost of spells from 33 to 24. And you can think of it like this. So with normal spell costs, you can get 3 spells off with a full soul meter. With Spell Twister, you can get 4, okay? And at the beginning of the fight, that's so much more burst damage, but throughout a fight, it's just so many more casts. So it's not one of those charms that's situational. Spell Twister is almost always good, unless you're just healing up a lot. Don't use Spell Twister then, of course. But otherwise, Spell Twister is just so good. Especially in the mid-game, once you get those level 2 spells, it's just all you need is Shaman Stone and Spell Twister. And it shows, because in the 112% speedrun, we use Shaman Stone and Spell Twister like half the run, because it's so good in the mid-game. Give Spell Twister a try if you're not sure what charm to use, and you have 2 charm notches, and you're using spells at all, use Spell Twister. It's super good. Okay, next up we've got Stalwart Shell. Now, this charm costs 2 charm notches, and it increases your invincibility frames after you get hit, and it decreases the amount of time you spend in knockback after you get hit. Okay, and it sounds like a pretty awesome effect, but the reality is that the iframes after getting hit don't matter that much in this game compared to in other games. Like, normally you'd expect that effect to be super good, but you already get a lot of iframes in Hollow Knight when you get hit, so it's like you can get hit and then you can get to safety 99% of the time. Don't get that much of a benefit from the extra iframes. And you know, the main example I can think of where Stalwart Shell is actually good is Any Radiance, which isn't even in the base game. So is it really that useful? Not too sure about this charm. I don't think it's that great, but it does have some use. Like, you can get extra time for healing immediately after a boss hits you, and using those iframes to get a heal in is generally not the best way to heal, because it's just like random whether you get hit or not, because you're not reacting to what the boss is doing, you're just praying that you get a heal in. Now, you can combine it with quick focus if you wanted, but I mean, that's 5 notches of commitment for what's basically a gimmick, and it can be pretty useful at times to just get like the free heal. But if you're using quick focus, like, just find an attack that the boss does where you can heal for free and use quick focus and heal like 3 times. It's like, it's not worth 5 notches. It's not worth the notch cost of Stalwart Shell usually, but the charm does have a bit of utility. I would put it at the top of C tier. Steady Body. Now, hope y'all are ready for a bit of controversy, because some people put this in the D tier, and they couldn't be more wrong. I actually thought, you know, when I was a beginner to Hollow Knight, I found Steady Body in Salubra's shop, and everyone has a bit of trouble getting used to the knockback from hitting an enemy with your nail, right? Like, they hit an enemy with their nail, they get knocked back, they get hit by an attack while they're getting knocked back, and they're like, okay, it's time to use Steady Body because this knockback is annoying. And they use it for a bit, and then they want to use the charm notches for something else, and they're like, okay, Steady Body, it's a decent charm, but it's a crutch. You can just negate the effect of Steady Body by just moving forward in between each nail swing. And most people kind of dismiss Steady Body because of that. But it's actually not true. Steady Body is all the way up here. Steady Body is crazy good. It's it only costs 1 charm notch, and the main strength of Steady Body is that it allows you to punish enemy attacks in ways that you otherwise couldn't, or in spots where you otherwise couldn't, or to do so more safely it also allows you to follow enemies more effectively when your nail also knocks them back. And let me kind of explain that. So there are some enemies, some bosses, where you hit them with your nail and they don't get knocked back, okay? So in those cases, even if you have Quick Slash and you're getting constantly knocked back, you can still swing at pretty much full speed. However, if you're trying to swing at full speed and you knock an enemy back, and you also get knocked back in the other direction, it's just, you're not able to follow them because both you and the boss are getting knocked back. So how can you swing at full speed if you're both getting knocked back? However, if just one of you gets knocked back because you're big brains and you're using steady body, then you can still follow that enemy as they get knocked back and just keep swinging at full speed. And that's probably like a 100% DPS increase for a 1 charm notch cost. So is it good? Yeah, it's crazy good in those situations. But even in other situations, steady body is still super good. I first got clued into how good this might be because I saw every single Pantheon 5 hitless runner is just using steady body. Now, why are they using it? The main reason why they use it is, one, for that DPS increase on enemies that get knocked back, but two, because it lets you play more safely while still dealing full DPS. So if a boss is doing some kind of attack where it puts hitboxes behind you and you want to hit the boss, without steady body, you have to kind of maneuver yourself in between each attack, which means you have to slow down because you're trying to find the perfect position to start your attack in. If you have steady body, you just swing at full speed. You don't have to move, you don't have to maneuver yourself, you don't have to find your positioning, you just keep swinging. And normally you can also do that by up-slashing the boss, because up-slashing doesn't incur any knockback. But up-slashes also mean you have to stand right next to the boss, which in some cases can be dangerous to do. Well, in a lot of cases, actually. In some cases, standing right next to the boss isn't even possible because it will have its own hitboxes there, or you just won't be able to get next to the boss in time before it moves again. So in those cases, steady body is super good. You could make an argument for it being higher than strength, but I think it's fine here. Okay, if you use Quick Slash, steady body also just kind of negates, like Quick Slash knocks you back more because you're hitting the boss faster, right? So steady body is generally paired up with Quick Slash. I forgot to mention that, but if you're using Quick Slash, definitely use steady body. Give it a try. It's a bit tough to get used to, but it's super, super strong. Okay, next up we have the unbreakable versions of these charms, and I'm actually not even going to be rating them because, what's kind of the point of rating these? I was rating them just based off their strength, not based off the convenience of having to go back and repair them. So either way, strength is still S tier, even if you have to repair it, and heart is still A tier, even if you have to repair it. So that just makes no difference. So these are just going to be in the same spot on the tier list as their counterparts. Okay, next up we have Weaversong. Okay, so for those of you who've been watching my videos, you know that I found a synergy with Weaversong and Grubsong where you can get a ton of soul from the Weaverlings in certain circumstances. So if the Weaverlings have enough enemies to hit, then they'll constantly hit the enemies and just give you such a huge supply of soul that Weaversong Grubsong acts as a soul battery. Weaversong on its own is terrible. Weaversong on its own, I would say, is solidly bottom tier, above Grimmchild, of course, because what isn't above Grimmchild? Sorry, Grimmchild. However, if you're using it with Grubsong, I would actually put Weaversong in B tier. And some people might find that a bit controversial, but holy crap, is the effect crazy in some boss fights. Like, you just get infinite soul. I tried this combo in the Eternal Ordeal, and I just never had to look at my soul. I just cast spells, and every time I had soul. I didn't run out of soul a single time, and I was using spells pretty often. So the effect is really good. Don't ever use this charm on its own, but with Grubsong, in some cases, it can be really, really strong. Baldur Shell, okay? We're going to be getting a bit controversial again. B tier, okay? A lot of people put this in bottom tier or C tier. This is actually an okay charm, okay? And the problem is that once again, it's kind of used like a crutch when it shouldn't be used as a crutch. Like, Baldur Shell is not actually like a really good beginner charm, but it is a good charm for a bit of insurance if you're already healing in spots that are smart. And the problem is that Baldur Shell is kind of like made out, like it looks like a crutch, but it's not that effective as a crutch because it only stops 4 attacks. And if those attacks get stopped, then your heal is getting canceled, and you're probably trying to heal more aggressively because you're like, hey, I'm invincible when I'm healing, so let's just heal whenever. But it's not that effective to do that, you know, because you're just going to use up the Baldur Shell charges, and then your charm is useless because it once it gets down to 0 charges, you know, it does nothing until you bench again. But, you know, if you're up against a boss that deals 2 damage and your Baldur Shell stops that damage, like, man, that's like having 2 extra health, you know? Baldur Shell isn't always great, but in some boss fights, like, I would actually kind of recommend this on Radiance, on Abzrad. It's not that bad, because there are spots to heal in Abzrad, but you have to have the experience to know when to heal. Like, where are spots that are safe to heal? You have to know, like, the delay in between enemy attacks, and you have to know, like, what attacks you can heal against and what attacks can't you heal against. And most beginners aren't going to know all that. So you equip Baldur Shell, you use up all the charges, and you're like, this charm's shit. But in some circumstances, if you're a bit more experienced, it can actually be kind of decent. So I would put Baldur Shell in the B tier. Well, where do we put it? Do we put it above Hiveblood? I think it's above Hiveblood, actually. I think I'd put it here. That might be a bit controversial, but I think it's not a bad charm. I think it has a bad reputation because it's seen to be a beginner's charm, and it's really not exactly that. Okay, next up is Carefree Melody. Now, if you know me, you'd know that this charm, for me personally, is somewhere in the S tier. But I'm going to try to be a little bit objective. This charm, okay, costs 3 charm notches, and you have to banish the Grim Troop to get it, so most people don't even get the charm, but what the charm does is it has a counter, okay? And every time you get hit, the counter goes up by 1. You start off with 0. And for each level the counter gets to, you have an additional 10% chance to negate the next hit that you take. So first hit, you have 0% chance. The next time you get hit, you have a 10% chance to negate the damage. Next time 20, next time 30%, next time 40%. And it goes all the way up to 90% chance to negate the damage. Now, there are a couple reasons why this is really good. First of all, on average, it has a 22.4% chance to negate damage, okay? That's almost 1 in 4. So on average, you're negating a bit less than 1 in 4 hits. That's really, really good. Now, it does take 3 charm notches, so it is a commitment to use, but if you combine the effect of Carefree Melody with other elements of survivability or heal builds, all of a sudden that extra efficiency of each one of your masks that you get from using this charm just makes it just pushes it to the next level. So if you're using Carefree Melody with quick focus, you're getting so much more health and your health becomes so much more efficient, right? So overall, this charm is just really, really good. It's kind of dampened by the charm notch cost again, but I would put this within the A tier, probably right before Nailmaster's Glory. But situationally, I think this is S tier. On average, I would say it's about here. Dashmaster, aka the Sands charm from Undertale. This is a... Okay, so most of the other charms are combat charms. This one just lets you get from point A to point B faster. And actually, in the latest patch of Hollow Knight, it made it so that Dashmaster is kind of fixed so that you don't accidentally down dash quite as easily, which is a huge buff for the charm, because the main drawback of Dashmaster is you you pogo something to refresh your dash, because you don't have a dash, so you pogo like a saw blade or something to get your dash back, and then you dash, but because of the fact that you are holding down, you just down dash into that saw blade. Okay, it happens so much when you're speedrunning, and it's pretty painful. So they finally fixed that in 1.5, and it makes Dashmaster quite a bit better, but Dashmaster is still just a charm to get from point A to point B. I have seen people use Dashmaster against like Inferno King Grimm, just for that one attack where you have to like run from one side of the arena to the other, because it's like shooting orbs everywhere. But against other vanilla Hollow Knight bosses, it doesn't have that much of a purpose. It's still kind of hard to rank it, because like you can't really rank a movement charm with other combat charms. Like you can't compare it to other charms because you're just using it to move around the map. So it's hard to rank it, but we'll throw it in the B tier because the B tier is lonely. And it's better than Hiveblood and Baldur Shell, so we'll put it there. But again, you know, it's pretty hard to rank it, so we'll just throw it there, I suppose. Next up is Deep Focus. Okay, this one is a bit hard to rate. A lot of people throw it into the bottom tier, and I actually don't quite agree that it should be there. Because, okay, it costs 4 charm notches, and yes, Quick Focus is a much better charm, and Deep Focus has a drawback built into it despite costing 4. So it increases the amount of time it takes to heal, but you heal 2 charm notches, you heal 2 health. Now, the thing is that you heal 2 health with the cost of 1 heal. And that's actually a pretty decent effect, and healing 2 health on its own is really strong. The thing is just the charm notch cost makes it very, very restrictive. And you have to use other charms with it to get the full effect. Now, Deep Focus does have a synergy with Spore Shroom to make a really huge Spore Cloud, which is actually kind of decent. It's a bit underrated, in my opinion. And if you combine it with Quick Focus, you can get like a roughly normal heal time for the 2 health. But that takes 7 charm notches, which is a lot. Overall, though, the fact that you can get 2 health off of a heal is underrated. Even if it takes 4 charm notches, it's still a strong effect, and that's why there's all these drawbacks built into it, because it's such a strong effect on its own. That said, I don't think I can put it higher than C tier. I would definitely say it's better than Stalwart Shell. You could maybe argue for it to be in the bottom of B tier, but it's... I'm kind of split, honestly. I don't know. We'll put it there. Next up is Defender's Crest, and this charm, it has a lot of synergies and effects, but they're not too useful, just being completely straight up with you. So it costs 1 charm notch, you get it after killing Dung Defender, and it has the effect if you're wearing it, then you get some new dialogue with some NPCs, and it reduces Leg Eater's costs by 20%, which is neat, but like, you know, it's not like Geo's that hard to come by. It also has synergies with Spore Shroom, which increases the damage but decreases the amount of times it hits. So, like, alright, that's cool, I guess. It makes Flukenest, it shoots like one super Flukenest rather than like the million pretty strong Flukenests. So that's also kind of not the greatest effect. And it adds like little clouds to Glowing Womb. Kind of cool, I guess, but Glowing Womb kind of sucks on its own already, so let's throw this in the D tier. It's not that great of a charm. It does have some benefit because, like, the Spore Clouds, I've heard some people using it to kill, like, the little balloon guys in the Lost Kin fight. So if you're doing, like, Radiant Lost Kin, it can help out a little bit, but generally you want to hit those guys to get soul from them anyway. But it can have some use, but it's super situational, and even in those situations, I think you're kind of better off with another charm. Okay, next up, we've got Flukenest. Now, Flukenest is in a weird spot because Team Cherry's been nerfing it and buffing it and nerfing it and buffing it, and, you know, in the 106% speedruns, they use Flukenest. You can just watch them. They get up close next to every single boss in the game, and they just cast Flukenest a couple times and the boss dies. That's because that was one of the patches where Team Cherry buffed the crap out of it. And then they realized how good it was, and they were like, oh, nope, and they made it useless again. And that's kind of the history of Flukenest. So right now, on current patch, apparently it does 80 damage with the Shaman Stone. So if you're using 6 charm notches worth of spells, it can do as much as a Shade Soul already does with a double hit. And keep in mind, Shade Soul double hits a lot of enemies. Flukenest cannot double hit because it just shoots out those flukes and they hit an enemy and they're gone. So you're spending 3 charm notches in a lot of cases for basically nothing. In older patches, it was broken. On current patch, Flukenest really isn't so hot. And I would generally recommend against it. It does have that synergy, as I said, with Defender's Crest, but, like, I mean, it doesn't do much damage at all. So I would recommend against it. Flukenest might make sense if it cost 1 charm notch. If it cost 2, I would still kind of rate it pretty low. But on current patch, I would say this is a C tier option. Better than Glowing Womb, but probably worse than Lifeblood Heart. Oh, maybe better than Lifeblood Heart. Maybe better than Stalwart Shell. Yeah, let's put it here. Because it does increase the damage of Shade Soul, but just like, it's not that great. It's not great for 3 charm notches. Okay, next up we have Greed. This charm is not so great, but it can be kind of useful if you're farming Geo for, you know, unbreakable charms. So if you want to farm Geo to get Unbreakable Strength and Unbreakable Heart, this is a good charm. But it only affects Geodrops from enemies, okay? It doesn't affect Geodrops from chests. It doesn't affect cell costs to Lem. It doesn't affect anything else really in the game, just enemy Geodrops. The majority of the Geo you get in Hollow Knight is going to be from selling relics and from boss chests. And this has no effect on that. So I would say Greed is within the D tier, but probably more useful than Defender's Crest, I guess. And let's find the other version of Greed. Here it is. And we'll also place that here. Alright, next up we have Fury of the Fallen. So this is a charm you get at the beginning of the game when you have 5 nail damage, and it really doesn't shine until you get a stronger nail with more charms to back it up. And the reason is it increases your nail damage not by a flat amount, but by a percent. So it increases it by 1.75 times, and that stacks with Unbreakable Strength and also Quick Slash, which are also top tier charms. So once you have a fully upgraded nail and, you know, you're past the middle stages of the game, you have all these charms, Fury of the Fallen still isn't that great because you have to be at 1 health to benefit. So, like, most of the time you're just, it's not worth it to put yourself at 1 health to get the damage bonus. Like, it's just not. The exception is if you're doing like an ascended boss fight that deals double damage, perhaps, because then you might be spending a good amount of your time at 1 health. But you're never going to want to intentionally get down to 1 health just for the damage bonus, because it's better to stay at high health and just, you know, play the fight out for longer. Like, the damage bonus doesn't make a huge enough difference for you to want to intentionally go down to 1 health, pretty much ever. So it's really situational. It's amazing for speedruns because the effect of Fury of the Fallen, like, you can't really understate that it's really, really strong, but it's not worth it to intentionally damage tank if you're doing it for progression. If you're doing it for speedruns, of course, Fury's great. But even for most speedruns, you usually prefer to use spells until you get into Pantheon speedruns. So, where the heck do we put Fury of the Fallen? I would put it in either the top of C tier or the bottom of B tier. But I could also see the argument for it even being D tier. It just depends on whether you're talking about, like, Hall of Gods, or if you're talking about, like, the entire casual playthrough of Hollow Knight, or if you're talking about speedruns. If you're talking about speedruns, you could put it in S tier. But if you're talking about casual play, you could put it at the below Grimmchild. Oh, well, I wouldn't put it below Grimmchild, but, you know, you could put it in D tier. I would put it, personally, at the bottom of B tier, because it, like, the effect is still super, super strong. But, yeah. Okay, everyone's favorite charm in their casual playthrough, Gathering Swarm. Obviously, at the top of S tier, if you're playing through Hollow Knight for the first time. If you're playing through it any other time, it's probably, like, bottom of D tier. And I would actually put it 1 step below Greed, if my window would cooperate. So it goes in D tier. And the reason is that the effect isn't, like, okay, so it's cool in the sense that you can just kill an enemy and the Geo flies to you. It's convenient. And if you're farming Geo, it's nice. But it's kind of like Greed in that it's really situational. Normally, you can just dash through an enemy as you kill it and you pick up all the Geo. So it's like, do you really need Gathering Swarm? It is convenient at times, but it's generally not super needed. And if you're collecting Geo from chests and such, it's really easy to collect all the Geo. So this is a convenience charm. It doesn't really help out too much, but, you know, of course, it's totally valid to use it. But I would put it in D tier because it has much less use than most of the other charms. Okay, next up is Grubberfly's Elegy. Now, this charm requires you to save all the grubs in the game, and in that sense, it's suboptimal. But, on the other hand, Grubberfly's Elegy has a pretty strong effect, which is giving you a ranged attack on each nail swing. Now, you have to be at full health to make use of it. For some people, it's not so great, because if you're the kind of player who, like, panics once they get hit, it's probably not so good for you to use Elegy, because you really have to play patiently and find a good spot to heal. Now, something to note is that Elegy stacks with Strength, and it also has synergy with Mark of Pride that makes your, like, ranged attack bigger, but that's not too useful, in my opinion. And it also works with Quick Slash, and it also has a synergy with Grubsong, which increases the amount of soul you get when you take a hit to 25. And that is a huge amount of soul to get when you get hit. And now Grubberfly's Elegy does cost 3 charm notches, but the effect is good enough to justify it. Overall, I would recommend it for Radiant Hall of Gods, or if you're doing hitless runs of any type. Elegy's pretty good. I would put it in the middle of the A tier, below Carefree Melody, because I love that charm. Okay, next up we have Grubsong. Now, Grubsong has a really powerful effect, because whenever you get hit, you get 15 soul back. If you combine it with Elegy, like I said, you get 25 soul back, which is an absolute ton. But 15 soul on its own is so much. Like, this charm only costs 1 notch to use. And every time you get hit, 15 soul. So if you get hit like 7 times, that's a full bar of soul. And that just enables you to heal up 3 times, or it enables you to cast a ton of spells. You can also use it between boss fights, like in the Pantheons, to get soul for the next boss, if you just like jump into spikes or jump into an enemy. We also use it in speedruns to get soul for the Grim fight during the balloon phases, so that we can continue to use spells on Grim during the balloon phase. Overall, this charm is just so good, and it fits into any build, because you always need soul in Hollow Knight. Like, soul is very, very strong, and it's one of the most powerful soul generating charms, despite costing 1 charm notch. This goes into S tier, in my opinion. I've seen this in bottom tier. What are you thinking? This goes in the S tier, dude. The next charm we'll talk about is Joni's Blessing. Now, Joni's Blessing is a bit confusing, okay? So, some of us might have had some success with Joni's Blessing in our casual playthroughs. I know I used it like a little bit from time to time, but the reality is that the charm is pretty awful. It costs 4 notches, so it's a huge investment, and it also has a huge drawback. So the effect is that it increases your total masks by 40%, but it turns all those masks into lifeblood, meaning you cannot heal unless you're using like Hiveblood, for example. That's awful. You can use Unbreakable Heart instead, and you get pretty much half the effect of Joni's Blessing for half the cost and no drawback. So why wouldn't you just use like Unbreakable Heart or a good survivability charm like Carefree Melody? Joni's Blessing is just kind of bad. So if you have, let's look at an example, which is if you have the max amount of masks, which is 9, you increase it by 40%. So you're going to get 4 masks from that. That's the same as Lifeblood Core, which costs 1 less charm notch and doesn't turn all your masks into lifeblood. So why wouldn't you just use Lifeblood Core, or why wouldn't you just use Unbreakable Heart? Now, you can stack all those up, sure, but then you're not using the good charms. Like, you can use a build like Joni's Blessing, Lifeblood Core, Unbreakable Heart, and it's like you have no charm notches left for all these amazing charms, and it's not even that great to begin with. Like, okay, you've got 20 health, and your nail damage is nothing, and your spell damage is nothing. It can situationally be alright. You can see some success with it, but overall it's just a really weak charm, in my opinion, and it's outclassed by pretty much everything else in the category. Okay, next up we have Lifeblood Core. Lifeblood Core is actually the only Lifeblood charm I would ever recommend using. I wouldn't recommend touching either of the other ones, and that's just because this one is objectively, statistically, more efficient. Now, Lifeblood Heart gives you 2 lifeblood for 2 notches. Joni's Blessing gives you 4 lifeblood for 4 notches, or potentially a couple more. And Lifeblood Core gives you 4 lifeblood for 3 notches. So it is statistically better than the other charms. And 4 lifeblood is actually a decent amount of lifeblood to work with. Now, I still say it's worse than Unbreakable Heart because Lifeblood has the drawback that you can't heal it without Hiveblood. But it is a decent amount of health to get if you want to face tank stuff. And if you want to really face tank stuff and combine this with like Unbreakable Heart, maybe even Carefree Melody, it's not that bad of a build to use. So where does this go? It obviously goes above Lifeblood Heart, and I think it's better than all these charms too. I even think it's better than all these charms. Better than Baldur Shell. but we'll put it behind Sands. So it's going to be close to the top of B tier, but not quite. Next up is Longnail. Longnail might be a bit controversial here as well, because I think it's not quite as great as people give it credit for. It doesn't have nearly as big of an effect as Mark of Pride, and it still costs 2 charm notches. It's used by a lot of people. Yeah, the idea of Longnail is obviously amazing. Like, having extra range, as I've said with Mark of Pride, is a super strong effect. But Longnail just doesn't quite cut it, in my opinion, in most cases. And let me just show you an image to kind of demonstrate that Longnail doesn't really make that big of a difference. So look at the default nail, and then compare it to Longnail. So you're getting like 8 to 10 extra pixels in range. Compare that to Mark of Pride, which is like 50 pixels. You know, like it's a huge difference compared to Longnail. Longnail doesn't quite give as much of a range increase as I think that most people realize. And overall, I wouldn't give Longnail a strong recommendation. If you're using a nail build, just stick to Mark of Pride. Now, Longnail, Mark of Pride together, you know, sure, it can be pretty strong, but I do think generally you can find a better charm to use with those last 2 charm notches than Longnail. I would put Longnail at the top of the B tier. That might be a bit controversial, but that's where it's going. Okay, now the next charm we're looking at is not Nailmaster's Glory, but Quick Slash. Quick Slash easily goes into S tier. Quick Slash is arguably the best charm in the game. It's in the top 3 with Unbreakable Strength and Shaman Stone for sure. Not too sure exactly what the order of that is, but like it kind of depends on different things. Like Quick Slash, the reason why it's so good is just like it increases your DPS by so much for only a 3 charm notch cost. Like you'd expect this to cost like 4 for what it does. And it increases your DPS, but it also increases how much soul you get, better than the soul generating charms. Like, you get more soul from Quick Slash than you do from like Soul Eater, or maybe it's roughly the same amount, but still, like, it's so good. You get so much more healing, you get so much more soul, your nail is dealing tons and tons of damage. So the effect is it decreases your attack duration, so which is the amount of time that the hitbox is active, by 0.07, and it decreases the cooldown, so how often you can swing, from 0.41 seconds to 0.25 seconds. That's a 1.64 times increase in how fast you can swing the sword. So 1.64 times DPS increase in your nail damage with 1 charm. That's more than Unbreakable Strength. But obviously, if you're using Quick Slash, combine it with Unbreakable Strength or the multiplicative damage increase. Those 2 charms together are just so bonkers overpowered. If you combine them with Fury, of course, Fury is rated pretty low, but in speedruns, like for Pantheons, you'd use it with Fury too. And you melt bosses so quickly, a lot of the bosses can't even attack before you kill them. So Quick Slash is really, really, really strong. And Quick Slash actually used to cost 2 charm notches. So if you have Quick Slash from a save, back when it used to cost 2, it stays at 2 forever. So you can have Quick Slash that costs 2 charm notches. You know, I've got that, not to brag. Really, really, really strong. You stagger bosses even more because you're hitting them more. One of the best charms in the game, without a doubt. Definitely use Quick Slash. Next up, we have Quick Focus. Okay, Quick Focus is a really strong charm. This kind of falls into the category of other survivability and healing charms that a lot of people think might be a crutch, but Quick Focus is really strong. It increases your healing speed by 33%, which means that you can just, in a lot of cases, you can pull off 1 heal in circumstances where you couldn't heal normally, or you can pull off multiple heals in situations where you could only heal once. And any of those situations that allows you to heal an additional time, it just gives you that much more likelihood to just be able to continue the fight until the boss dies. Because it makes the fights so much more forgiving when you can find those instances where you can just squeeze in a heal because of quick focus. So yeah, I mean, it costs 3 charm notches, but those charm notches are totally worth it, especially when you compare it to deep focus, which costs 4 charm notches, but also has a huge drawback of increasing your heal time. Quick focus doesn't have a drawback, it's just faster heals. I highly recommend using quick focus with Carefree Melody if you have the notches to do so, because the combination of being able to heal so much more and also having damage negated so that the masks that you get are more efficient, they just have such a strong synergy together. And I'd actually put quick focus within the A tier, pretty close to the top, potentially above Spell Twister, but as a speedrunner, I love Spell Twister, so gotta put this one step below Spell Twister in the A tier. Okay, next up is Sharp Shadow. Now, Sharp Shadow is loved by some and hated by most, and I am pretty much in the camp of hating it, but I do recognize that it has some value. So some bosses you'll want to be able to use Sharp Shadow against because you can safely dash through them to dodge an attack, and you also deal a bit of damage to them on top of that, which is sometimes nice. The problem with Sharp Shadow is that it deals a pretty pitiful amount of damage. It's only 1 times your nail, so it's just like a regular nail swing, and it costs 2 charm notches. I would really expect something like Sharp Shadow to cost 1 charm notch, because it's not like the extra dash length is an objective benefit. It makes things really awkward sometimes when you expect a certain dash length and all of a sudden your shade cloaks back up and you just zoom and you're not expecting it. And also the damage just ain't enough. I'd expect it to deal 2 times, maybe even 3 times, or 2.5 times perhaps, your nail damage when you hit an enemy successfully with it. If it's going to cost 2 charm notches, I'd expect that, but it only deals 1 times. So it's pretty tough to rate, but it does have some situational usefulness because it lets you comfortably dash through some bosses with bigger hitboxes. Like, an example would be Traitor Lord, that some people see success with Sharp Shadow. Generally, I don't think this charm is too hot though. It's kind of like Steady Body, Heavy Blow, in that it has like a couple bosses it's useful against. But I'd rate it better than Glowing Womb, for example. Maybe even better than Stalwart Shell. It's a little bit tough to rate, but I would put it somewhere within C tier for sure. Probably around here. Next up, we have Soul Catcher. Now, Soul Catcher is another soul generation charm, of which there are many in Hollow Knight, and Soul Catcher is pretty clearly the worst. You also get it really early on in the game, so it does have some usefulness. It does have some benefit in that, like, you know, it's a charm that you get early on, and it's useful early on until you get better charms. So the effect is you get 3 extra soul when you hit an enemy with your nail. And it costs 2 charm notches. You compare it to Soul Eater, which gets you 8 extra soul per hit for 4 charm notches. But that's also, of course, a much bigger commitment. Soul Catcher is, in my opinion, pretty outclassed by Spell Twister, which decreases the soul cost of spells to 24. Much better effect than Soul Catcher, even though Soul Catcher is beneficial in the fact that you can use that soul to heal instead of use spells, but still Spell Twister is way better in my opinion. But Soul Catcher is not a terrible charm by any means. It still has a pretty nice effect, and the 3 extra soul that you get per hit does stack up over time. I would put this charm within the B tier, probably above Lifeblood Core and Dashmaster, but maybe before Longnail, maybe above Longnail. Yeah, above Longnail. All right, so next up we have Spore Shroom. This is a charm that's actually kind of underrated. Now, it's not an S tier charm by any means, but it is a nice complement to a heal build. So heal builds in Hollow Knight actually have a kind of bad reputation because you kind of use one as a new player and then you get to the bosses that deal 2 health of damage and you kind of get wrecked. But the thing is that if you know when to heal, healing is pretty damn effective. And you can heal against almost any boss in the game. Like, there's always attacks that bosses do that you can heal up against. And there's oftentimes, like, phase changes, or when bosses get staggered, and so on, where you can heal up safely. So using a heal build in Hollow Knight is totally legit. It's not like a newbie beginner move, or a crutch, or anything. I mean, it can be, but overall, it's not a bad idea to use heal builds. And Spore Shroom is just a 1 charm notch charm that has a nice little effect that can cap off a heal build. So what is the effect? Because it looks like it makes a cloud that does nothing, but the cloud actually deals 27 damage over 4.1 seconds. And you can make another cloud. It has a 4.25 second cooldown. So you can have it so that pretty much every time you heal, you can spawn one of these clouds and it deals over a nail hit worth of damage. So it's not a bad effect. Now, most of the time, the boss isn't going to be within the cloud through the entire duration of it, but it's still going to deal a pretty decent chunk. It's not going to be like a spell build worth of DPS or anything, but for a 1 charm notch, it's really not that bad of an effect, especially if you're healing lots. It also has a nice synergy with Deep Focus, which increases the size of the gas cloud by 33%. And if you're using a heal build anyway, you might be using Deep Focus. So just having that giant gas cloud with Deep Focus is actually pretty nice. If you want to go crazy with the gas cloud build, you can use Defender's Crest. Increases the damage up to 40. I don't know if it's worth the extra charm notch, but you might consider using it. Either way, Spore Shroom, better than most people think, actually, in my opinion. I would put it probably before Lifeblood Core, but above Baldur Shell. Okay, next up we have Sprintmaster. And Sprintmaster, it's kind of in the same category as Dashmaster, which is like, how do you fit this into a charm tier list of mostly combat-related charms? But even in terms of movement charms, Sprintmaster is not really worth it. It does help get you from point A to point B a little bit faster, but the fact is that, like, if you're traveling around Hollownest, you're going to be dashing 90% of the time. And you have a little bit of time in between dashes where you walk, yeah. But, having a 20% increase to 10% of the time, the math just doesn't work out that much in Sprintmaster's favor. And also, another big drawback of Sprintmaster is that it doesn't increase your speed while you're in the air, so it only works when you're on the ground. One nice thing about Sprintmaster is that it increases the speed up to like 30%, I want to say, 37% additional walk speed if you have Dashmaster equipped as well. But again, like, it's not a huge effect. It is kind of nice. It makes you look like you're Naruto, so if you want to do that Naruto impression, then Sprintmaster's pretty cool for that, I suppose. Apparently it makes the Weaverlings jump farther and move faster too, so if you're using that Grubsong, Weaversong build, I can't actually honestly recommend Sprintmaster. It's not a great charm, and If you're using it to travel around Hollownest, yeah, sure, but it's kind of like with, I would put it with Gathering Swarm. It's got a bit of utility, but overall it's kind of crap. Next up, we have Steady Body again. Let's skip that one. And Thorns of Agony. Oh god. This charm sucks so bad. Not only is the effect horrible, it's probably the most annoying charm in the game to use. And let me just rant to you all about Thorns of Agony, because this charm is ass. So it has a 1 charm notch cost. Maybe they should have gone with 0, and I might use it. Probably not. If it were like -1, I might use it then. But every time you get hit with Thorns of Agony, it freezes you in place while the rest of the game continues going, and you do this horrible animation which doesn't hit anything half the time, and you deal your base nail damage to everything around you if it hits. Why wouldn't you just not use Thorns of Agony, and then instead of doing that stupid animation, you just hit the enemy with your nail? Why wouldn't you just do that? And then you get soul back as well. So what's the point of Thorns of Agony? Now, there's so many times where I'm playing where I get hit, and I want to use the invincibility frames after getting hit to land some nail swings on the enemy and get some soul back to heal up because I just got hit. But Thorns of Agony will sometimes just kill the enemy, preventing you from hitting it to get soul. So I'm just like sitting there with no enemies around me because Thorns of Agony killed the enemy. And it's just not a useful charm. I would really recommend against using it. I would put it in slightly better than Grimmchild. It might be worse than Grimmchild. Grimmchild does have some benefit. You know, like, Grimmchild's cute, at least. Thorns of Agony is not, you know, it doesn't have any redeeming qualities. Okay, next up we have Void Heart. So where the heck do we rate Void Heart? I think the answer is we don't. So I'm putting Void Heart after Grimmchild because Grimmchild always gets me killed. I hate this charm. The fact that it gets me killed in my speedruns, that's a problem. So Void Heart, you're going above Grimmchild, beneath Defender's Crest. That's a pretty sad spot to be. It does have the benefit of making shades not attack you, but you know, I don't really consider that a problem. But yeah, Void Heart goes there. Alright, we're rating Wayward Compass. Time for memes. Just kidding, we're going into the D tier. Sorry, buddy. Wayward Compass is pretty damn useful in your casual playthrough. Once you kind of know where you are on the map, which is, who knows where they are on the map. I've played multiplayer games, and I've been in a room, and I see someone else on the map. I have no idea where they are. I need Wayward Compass of my own to even figure out where I am. And I've played this game for well over 1,000 hours. So Wayward Compass, it's pretty useful, but it goes with the other utility charms in that, like, you know, yeah, there's going to be uses for it. There's going to be times where you want to equip it and it's beneficial, but it's not like, it can't be rated within the combat charms, really. So it's going to go into the D tier. Sorry, Wayward Compass memers. The last charm of the game, another doozy, is Dreamshield. So Dreamshield is a really kind of bizarre charm that just, I don't quite understand what they were thinking. You know, I understand that like some charms just aren't gonna be so great, but Dreamshield costs 3 charm notches. Okay, this is something a lot of people might not realize because they don't use Dreamshield ever. They could just kind of equip it. They're like, okay, this is not so great, and they don't ever equip it again. But they forget that it costs 3 charm notches. Why the heck does this cost 3? Because the effect is just, it swirls around you extremely slowly, and if it hits an enemy, it deals 1 times nail damage, and it might block something. It doesn't block all projectiles though, so like the fact that you can't position it, it's just going around randomly. doesn't block everything. The fact that it's not consistent and it's just random and just doesn't do that much makes it a pretty terrible charm overall. So I would put this in bottom tier. I actually think it's worse than like Heavy Body and Glowing Womb and everything. And I do get that it has some usefulness in some circumstances, but it's just so situational, and even in those situations, there's definitely a better charm for 3 notches, trust me. You can definitely find something better. So I would put this below Joni's Blessing, but above Defender's Crest. Okay, so that is my charm tier list for Hollow Knight in 2021. So this isn't going to be like a definitive list. We have a lot of weirdness with situational charms or utility charms, kind of just like lumped together, and also charms like Void Heart and Kingsoul that you don't really use that much in the real game. But yeah, I think generally you have a lot of these really powerful charms in the S tier. And I think generally people also underrate some of the survivability charms like Quick Focus, Carefree Melody, Unbreakable Heart, and etc. And also Soul Generation. I think some people might rate Soul Eater a little bit lower than I do, but I think it's pretty strong. And I think I've made a pretty good case for most of these. Some of these might be like a little bit controversial to some. But yeah, this is my opinion on where everything is. Of course, you're free to disagree, but just remember, I'm the God Gamer, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, thank y'all for watching. This video's been going on forever. Hope y'all enjoyed, though. Have a wonderful day.